Showers of blessing, oh, that gently they would pour. Now as you daughter confessing, now as on Jesus we call. Showers of blessing we need. Mercy drops heavens are falling, but for the showers we plead.
Tony, if Judas is quiet, would you like to pray?
Judas is sleeping, and hopefully. Holy Heavenly Father, Lord God, we come before you, and we give you so much thanks and praise. We thank you for the Sabbath day, Father, when we know that you and your angels are in our midst, when we know that we are surrounded with holy heaven, warring off all the evil that wants to bring us down. Father, we thank you for these messages that you have given us, and we thank you for giving us the eyes to see. We thank you for the studies, Father, for they may becoming simpler, but at the same time, there is still much need to practice. Lord, we also come before you because you are God, our creator, our deliverer, and we are in love with you, Lord. God, we just want to thank you and praise you all the day long. We ask for showers of blessings on the rest of this, at the time we have together. And I ask for blessings on each and every one of us who are clinging to you, Father, because we have nowhere else to go, nowhere else to cling on to. It's all about you, Father. It's not about us. We are here as your servants and your messengers. You have raised us up a people, and we pray, Father, that we are worthy of the call. We ask these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I'm going to do another quick review of what the point of what we're doing is, just because we're talking on break, and I thought it'd be useful because Diadochi War 3 is new, but World War 1 is going to be a lot more complicated than the one we just did. So something I wanted to put, oh yeah, so the reason why we're looking at it is because both of these wars, Diadochi War 3, to remind everyone, Diadochi War 3 and World War 1 are filling in this gap. So the waymarks we're looking at is here. So we've seen war at these waymarks, but now there's been actually a war going on this whole time in this area too, and this is what we need to look at. We're going to populate this area like we have been. So we look on our lines, and you have 1989, 2001, then you have 2003. Once and twice, and then you have a little 2007 here, and then this area shows us that there's wars going on with spheres of influence that we haven't seen before or weren't categorizing. And this is gonna help us see something else when it comes to which front of warfare we've been looking at. And at the end, what we're gonna see, all application, I think this is the line, right? We're going to look at the full line and see how it all goes in on our line, because we have a few waymarks that have been added, and we're going to look at the application of everything together, okay? But this, okay, it is moving. So this area here, my mouse isn't cooperating on there, but these lines that you see on top of the actual line, that's what we're looking at, and we're trying to see what's going on with that there. We're Let's go back to here and find where we were. Okay. And I think I moved it, so now we're going to have issues. There, okay. So let's go to World War 1. If you want to understand World War 3, you need to understand World War 1 and World War 2 based on the triple application of prophecy. World War 1 is the history we're going to go look at because we already have World War 2. So there are a few causes of World War 1. The main catalyst that we're going to look at is the Bosnian Crisis. This is the main thing that sowed a huge seed for war. And this is in 1908. So I might go I might go a little fast and do a few waymarks at a time to try to get through this because this has more information than the other one. So in this war, the 1908 Bosnian Crisis, in this war there are two sides, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. So the Triple Alliance was a failure and it consisted of Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy. Before we go any further, I know I have this in here somewhere, but I'll skip it. But again, this is to help everyone out. In this war, in World War I, Russia is going to be who Russia is. Russia's the king of the South. Austria-Hungary and Germany are both going to represent the king of the North. Just different layers or different perspectives of the king of the North, okay? But it helps that Austria-Hungary and Germany are both in complete alliance. So they're not separate. You can just think of them together. They're the king of the North. And Russia is the king of the South. Serbia is a sphere of influence of Russia, okay? So Serbia is a sphere of influence of Russia, and Bosnia is a sphere of influence of Serbia, all right? So if you guys think of how Yemen is a sphere of influence of well, it's being fought over. So who would be a sphere of influence? They're fighting over that. So you can think of that as under Saudi Arabia or Iraq, whatever. But Iraq is then a sphere of influence under Russia. So it's just like a little egg hatchling out, a little tinier sphere of influence. Let me look at the map so we can familiarize ourselves with this region. So you have Serbia here in the pink. And Serbia is a Slavic country, and you have the other Slavic countries all around here. And these are obviously all related with the big Slavic country, the old Russia over there. And so Serbia is here, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina are right here.
Real quick, a question.
Yes.
So all of those countries right there where you have Romania and Serbia, they're like a part of Russia. No, they're outside of Russia.
Under the sphere of kind of thing. They're their own separate countries. And actually they keep going back.
And Russia was communist, those countries were communist countries.
Yeah, and they were kind of operated under, but what's happening in this time period is you have the king of the North, Germany and Austria-Hungary fighting for power over the Balkan countries. You have Russia fighting for power over the Balkan countries, and you have the Ottoman Empire fighting for control of the Balkan countries. So all three entities are fighting over the Balkan countries, but at this time, right before World War I started, the Ottoman Empire got shooed out of that region, and you have Russia mainly in the sphere of influence of those Balkan countries, and Austria-Hungary wanted to take that away. Serbia, let's go back to our notes before I get ahead of myself here, and then I'm going to get all out of whack. Where am I? So before World War I, there's a lot of tension building through Europe and a lot of revolutions. They're becoming commonplace. The king of Serbia was assassinated in a coup, and a pro-Russian government comes into power. So Serbia is now pro-Russian and ambitious. So Serbia was in a very Slavic region, like we just saw, all the Balkan countries. And Serbia had the ambition to control and unite all the Slavic nations because they're like, oh, this is, my brethren, we're all the same people. We should all be one country because we're all this, why the splitting? Why? So the AH is Austria-Hungary. I got sick. I had to write that so many times. I got sick of it. So AH is Austria-Hungary.
How did Serbia get that power to do that? To even get the people, like the other countries, to collaborate and become pro-Russia?
They were more developed.
Oh, okay.
That's the only thing that ever really separates them and who gets more power and who gets to do what is even in like third world countries area, the tiny one that's just even a little bit more advanced. It's like, okay, I got this, everyone, I'm the boss. And that's seemingly seems to happen what happened with Serbia. And so you have the two smaller places, Serbia and Bosnia, and Austria-Hungary wants to take that area. So I'm going to go back to, Bosnia. This is what I wanted to read. Here's another one. So you have Serbia here, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina, the smaller and to the left. So, and Serbia also wanted the Adriatic seaport. They wanted access to that here, which is over here, right between here and Italy. But Austria-Hungary wanted that also because it's a nice prime real estate, and you have a lot of trade that could go on through there. So that's another reason why they fought over this area of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
I guess it's considering perspective because Serbia at the bottom one looks a lot bigger. In the bottom map, the one below, it looks a lot
Because it's zoomed in.
Okay. Yeah, that's perspective. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, what did I write here? So Serbia was wanting to control the area of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Austria-Hungary instead marched down and took control of Bosnia in 1908, and it infuriated Serbia. Up until now, Austria-Hungary was trying to control Serbia through economic means. Now this Bosnia situation pushed them over the edge. So Serbia appeals to Russia, who is their protector. They're under their sphere of influence. Russia is not strong enough right now, so they can't help. They just lost a war with Japan at this time. This is 1908, okay? This is when the Bosnian Crisis happens. So keep that separate because later on Russia is going to be able to help. But just right now in 1908, when Austria-Hungary goes into Bosnia and Serbia is upset at that because it's their little sphere of influence, Russia can't help them. So Russia just lost a war in Japan and they just experienced an attempted revolution. So they've been very weakened at this point and they can't help. But this Bosnian crisis helped sow the seeds for war, basically. We're going to go back. So you have this bigger territory of Austria-Hungary trying to get involved into two smaller areas, Bosnia and Serbia. They try to control the area through economic means, then they just take Bosnia. Serbia has a bigger ally, Russia, but it is too weak to help Serbia at this time. Okay, so remember, there's a lot of talk about Bosnia and Serbia. Bosnia and Serbia are just areas of influence, spheres of influence. The fight is always between King of the North and King of the South, and King of the South is Russia, and Germany and Austria-Hungary are King of the North. So just keep those organized in the head. So Serbia and Russia cannot, Russia can't respond to Serbia's call for help in the Bosnian crisis in 1908. So out of this situation, a terrorist organization forms called the Black Hand. And I think this is radicalized Serbians that were in Bosnia when it was taken by Austria-Hungary, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to check on that though, but there was some extra history I looked into to try to understand this. So first, at this time, Austria-Hungary finds out it has the full support of Germany, so they start to act more recklessly. Italy became disgusted because up until now you had Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy in a little alliance. I think it was the whatever it said earlier, some kind of alliance, the Triple Alliance. So Italy became disgusted and with that alliance, and they were completely out. So you just had Austria-Hungary and Germany. So the two major things that happened that caused the huge situation for the future when the World War I started is because of this Bosnian crisis, this is the seeds that were sown, okay? Russia was humiliated because they couldn't protect their ally. And they promised that this would never happen again. They vowed that the next time it would be war. So next thing is that Serbia became more determined against Austria-Hungary. This situation with Austria-Hungary invading Bosnia and Russia not being able to help caused a few things to happen. So this is the terrorist organization, okay? So you had Russia is humiliated. They vow this will never happen again. And then you have a terrorist organization formed. So in June 28, 1914, this terrorist organization, the Black Hand, launches a terrorist attack against Austria-Hungary. They assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This is a terrorist attack. The Black Hand assassinated the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Austrian-Hungarian government for many years had wanted war with Serbia. It was looked down upon by the neighboring European countries because it was such a tiny country, and they finally left Ottoman rule and they wanted to let this little country, grow and flourish and have strength. And it was seen to be a bully if you went over there trying to mess with this tiny little country. So everyone looked down on it, but Austria-Hungary always wanted to go in there. They just didn't have an excuse. But this assassination of Franz Ferdinand gave them an excuse for war. So in the 8 years between 1906 and 1918, the Austrian Hungarian General Hotzendorf had asked for a surprise war with Serbia more than 25 times. So they wanted that war. They had wanted a war with Serbia. This only gave them the excuse. When they want that war, they're facing the Triple Entente. Entente is a word for friendship. It is a threefold enemy. So the Triple Entente from the Google friendship. Okay. It was the understanding linking the Russian Empire, the French Third Republic, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland after the signing of the Anglo-Russian Entente of 31st of August 1907.
Can you go up? Sorry. In the 8 years between 1906 and 1918, that's 8 years.
No, I don't know how, but I took that from test. So I don't know what I
Let
did
me
there.
do that.
But, Hotzendorf. What was 6 after 1906? 8 after that. Would be 14. Oh yeah, that would make sense. 1914 when the war actually started. Okay,
Oh
now.
yeah. No, that's 8 years. Yeah.
Okay, so the Triple Entente was Russia, the UK, and France. Okay, the agreement or the alliance. So the Triple Entente. So Austria-Hungary sent Serbia an ultimatum with a list of demands, and Serbia fulfills most of those demands. So wait, what just happened? What? Okay, I'll have to figure that out later because I even get confused. This is confusing for real. So that's against the, okay. Remember when it comes to these histories that things need to be switched around. So we're gonna look at that in a minute. But that just gave me a really bad headache. Okay, so Austria-Hungary sends Serbia an ultimatum with a list of demands, and Serbia fulfills most of those demands. The European leaders feel that Serbia has done enough to avoid war with Austria-Hungary. This was not the case, and many of them are surprised when 1 month to the day after the terrorist attack, Austria-Hungary invades Serbia. At this time, Serbia is still under the sphere of influence of Russia. So 1908, you had the Bosnian Crisis. 1914, you have the invasion of Austria-Hungary invading Serbia. At this point, remember, Russia's vow was never again, if this happens again, it's going to be war. So this is where that's going to happen. So this begins World War I. This is the history of World War I. Austria-Hungary invades Serbia. Serbia's ally springs into action. That's Russia. This becomes a war between Germany and Austria-Hungary, which we have connected, and Russia. So remember, Germany and Austria-Hungary are on one side, Russia is on the other. So it stems from July 28, 1914. So several years passed. We're skipping a lot of history in World War I, and we're gonna actually let's fill in some lines before we keep going any further. Before we lose our way.
So is this called World War I?
Yeah. Yep. World War I. So we're going to start off with the Bosnian Crisis. In 1908. Bosnian. So we're going to say Austria-Hungary takes Serbia. No, it takes Bosnia. Why did I write that there? Takes Bosnia. Oh no, Serbia's. Oh, okay, see. Takes Serbia's sphere of influence, Bosnia.
What does AH mean again?
Austria-Hungary.
Oh, yeah, that's
Bosnia. Russia is too weak to help.
fucking failed this class.
I know, me too.
Yeah, well, I really felt it because I wasn't with it when you guys did.
Oh no. Oops.
What do you mean you were here?
Because she wrote in the middle.
Oh,
Oops.
you were,
I totally missed when you just
Oh,
jumped down.
But it could be the attention, your attention was pulled away and just doing something else. And
Yeah.
you missed that line.
We should pass by that line.
Oops.
I can rewrite it at home. I'll print the file and redo it.
okay. Black
Is
hand.
that June 28th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. It's got a
Okay.
weird looking 8.
It had to be either 6 or 8 in my mind, so.
I'm not good with writing anything.
Actually, you're doing a pretty good job writing with that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we have the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Let's say, if I Franz Ferdinand is a terrorist attacking. And then we have an ultimatum. From Austria-Hungary to Serbia. Okay. Scooch over. And we're gonna go to July 28th. So first we had June and now we're in July. It's just 1 month. 1 month later. July 28th. 1914. Austria-Hungary invades Serbia.
Is that July 28th? Isn't that interesting? It went from June 28th to July 28th.
Yeah, it was exactly 1 month to the day.
Wow.
Yeah. Another thing we're gonna just add up here. To here. And a little tiny line that says Eastern Front. You just put East. Eastern Front.
We do write that, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's gonna be importante.
To the next line.
Yeah.
Oh no, I wrote in the wrong spot. You know, sue me.
I got that part right.
I know.
So, and then this one, let's see, June 28th, 1914. Because. Okay. So then the other thing we're gonna do is also from here. We're gonna do another line all the way to the end here. Oh, this is gonna be Western Front.
From the same place.
Yeah.
They look like they have a little bit different looking.
Do you have whiteout or anything?
I don't think so. I feel like you would have whiteout. You are always prepared. I feel like you just have it somehow magically.
That's funny.
I have
I
all
do.
the pens, but none of the whiteout.
This is why we use pencils and erasers.
Is that what you're using? Good for you. Because I totally
Oh,
messed
now
up.
you tell us.
Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay, so several years passed, and now we have Germany and Russia. They've been fighting this battle for several years. About 3 years, Germany decides on a new tactic, and this is keep very close attention to what's about to happen here. So they want that war on the Eastern Front to end, because war started on the Eastern Front there when World War I started. They decided on a very clever tactic. Germany identifies a man hiding out in Switzerland. His name is Vladimir Lenin. He has been in a 10-year exile in Switzerland. So Germany decides if they want to defeat Russia, the best way to do it is to orchestrate an internal revolution. So Germany, the king of the north in this situation, is going to send in Lenin into the king of the south's land to destroy them from the inside. Okay? They don't believe in his message, but Lenin has spoken favorably of ending the war. And Lenin is socialist. That's why he was actually kicked out of Russia, because him and Trotsky were both had these socialist Marxist ideals, and they were kicked out and exiled out of Russia for their belief system. They were in Switzerland, or at least Lenin was. I'm not sure what Trotsky was doing at the time. There's a video that talks about it. That's in your notes. You can watch it. But Lenin is there. But Lenin has spoken favorably about ending the war, and that's what Germany wanted. So they said, okay, we'll send this guy in because he's at least agreeing with what we want. Okay. So Lenin has said that he wants to take Russia out of the war. Germany says that the best way to take Russia out of the war is to place Lenin in power. So Germany takes Lenin from Switzerland and puts him in a boxcar. They seal it, and there are no windows. It is totally sealed, and they send Lenin through Germany and Sweden and into Finland, and then Germany gives Lenin to Russia. So because they sealed the train, they don't have to legally recognize that it came from Germany.
Wait, why did they do that?
He was German. I mean, he was Russian.
Yeah, he was Russian, but he was kicked out of,
Exiled for 10 years in Switzerland.
yeah, because of his political ideals. They were scared of him.
Oh,
He was gaining a lot of ground, and he had supporters, and the Russians were afraid that he's going to take over the government. So like, we got to kick this guy out before he takes over this country with his ideas.
you mean Germany? Because Germany is giving him to Russia.
No, Russia kicked him out.
Oh.
So Germany sends him over there to do the job that he wanted to do to begin with the exile before, right?
Oh, okay.
Wow,
I missed that part. Okay.
And that's a good part to follow. In our time, it's
Oh,
completely
really?
flipped the other way around, though. So just good that you get that. Let's make sure that that's solidified for everyone, though, because that is a really important point. So
I wondered about that when she first said it. It's like, wasn't Lenin Russian? What do you mean Germany sent him?
Lenin is Russian, but he was kicked out of Russia. He was skedaddled out of there, and then Germany says, "Hey, look, this Russian guy that the Russians hate, let's send him back in there and have him."
Okay, I'm sure glad we're going to be going through this a lot more.
Yeah, we have to.
He became a spy.
Not a spy. He just became like a little insurgent or whatever.
Like you're going in there to start a revolution against the government.
Yeah.
So he went-
With this.
He's a Russian. He went back into Russia without Russia knowing about it.
Yeah.
And so now he's in there without them knowing.
And he
Yeah.
began a movement.
And it began a movement.
We're gonna watch a video. There's 2 videos here. We're gonna skip the other one because I really want to watch the Lenin Trotsky one. This is an important point because King of the South is Russia. Lenin is Russian. But this waymark where this gets set up on our waymark is at the Battle of Ipsus. And so the thing that I'm going to tell you we're going to do now, so you have this in your mind, when it comes to Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum, we know that because it's an alpha history, the omega history is going to be different. We have to switch it completely backwards because you have at Raphia on the history of failure, you have the King of the South going against the King of the North and the King of the North winning. But at Raphia, it has to be the King of the North who goes against the King of the South and the South winning, right? So we took from the alpha history and we flipped it.
Chiasm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. We flipped it, and that's how we get what happens in an omega history. So in this history, we're going to have Germany chooses a Russian man that's dangerous to Russia to go back into Russia and destroy them. In our history, we have Russia choosing an American man to send back into America to destroy America.
Who is that?
Trump.
Trump.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
how do you never?
Sorry. Okay.
But he's not really.
Trump is
Yes,
American.
he is. How did he get out of? How did he get out of the
No
U.S.?
one wants to believe he is, but he's American.
And isn't it funny that he's German?
Oh,
And
he's-
it's the Russians sending a German in?
Is he German?
Yeah.
He thinks he is.
No, he is German.
He-
He
well,
is German.
He said that his dad was
How
born
many
in Germany, and he's
generations?
not.
Oh, his dad's German, but
Not.
he's an American.
Yeah.
He's not
But
a
he's Russian
German.
at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Russian at heart.
Anyways,
But he wasn't exiled.
he wasn't exiled, but people here looked at him like he was crazy. He wasn't someone who people were like, that guy would make a great president. Like, especially 2014, no one was thinking that, but you had him and Russia planning it then. But in 2016 at the Battle of Ipsus,
That's
which is
interesting.
the four
Wow.
battles that we switch between Alpha and Omega histories, we're gonna have a flip and a switch that we need to do there between this history and our history. We'll make that application. So let's get through this.
That's good. It's becoming a little bit clearer.
So Lenin goes back into Russia and he starts a revolution. What was happening with Russia at this point, they were becoming weaker anyways. So a lot of people who were exiled were being just kind of like not too harshly taken back in, like they weren't going to be super strict about it. So he was able to come back because of that anyways. So even though like it seems like, oh, a train and it was sealed and you expect me to take back this exile, so they're like, yeah, okay, fine, we're like not that great right now, so it's fine. So they just let him back in. He goes back in there. So Ludendorff, a German politician, says Lenin will overthrow the Russian patriots, and then I will strangle him and all his friends. This was a German plot. As this war has progressed, Germany has a plan. They finance Lenin. They send him through to Russia. Lenin overthrows the government under the promise of ending the war and restoring peace between Russia and Germany. He accomplishes that goal November 8, 1917.
Election.
Yeah, which is how we're going to apply it. So despite the war, Germany permitted Lenin and some of his friends to enter back into Russia in a sealed train. If you went to Berlin Historical Museum, there are documents that will cover this affair. One German diplomat sent a telegram to Berlin. It said, Lenin has arrived safely inside Russia. He's doing just what we want. He did that November 8, 1917. Then he fulfills his promise and ends the war on the Eastern Front March 3, 1918. It is known as the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. As Lenin promised, he ended the war on the Eastern Front, but at a great loss to Russia. So he lost his spheres of influence. By the terms of the treaty, Russia lost about 1 million square miles of territory, 1/3 of its population, a majority of its industry, including coal, oil, and iron. Lenin called this treaty the depths of defeat, dismemberment, even enslavement and humiliation. That was March 3rd, 1918. We see Russia surrender to Germany.
Okay, whoa. What just happened?
So Russia,
So Lenin is in Russia.
and he does what Germany wanted.
Okay,
He stopped the war.
okay.
But for the war to end, Russia,
It cost Russia.
it cost Russia a lot because Germany was smart and they had a game plan. So they said, okay, we're going to stop the war with you. We don't want to deal with this war. You had a deal with us. We financed you. So you're going to stop the war in your country. And we want you to sign this agreement. And Lenin had to fight to get the Russian people to accept it because that agreement said that Russia's going to lose a lot. So it's really crazy. So he did what Germany wanted. And he did it for what he thought was the good of his country, but they lost a lot in the process because Germany's crazy. So Germany had its own problems. They're still having troubles on the Western Front, regardless of the conditions on the East. The Western Front, they are not able to win. The Western Front, remember, is with the Britain is there and some other allies. I forget who, France.
Isn't U.S. there?
I think.
Didn't U.S. enter into the war and become an ally with Germany, or was that later on? Because I know that they were part of the war.
World War One?
Yeah. Wait, hold on. Was the U.S. part of World War One or no?
I don't remember her ever
Never mind.
mentioning it in
Never
this
mind.
one. I know in World War
Never
II
mind.
they helped Russia bring Germany down.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, World War II. They were
Yeah.
part of it. Okay.
But the U.S. is always somewhere there on the sidelines doing something, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they had, because I remember they had an economic thing to help Germany for a while, but then once because after the Treaty of Versailles, I'm gonna mess it up, I'm not even gonna try. But anyway, so Germany had its own problem, so the Western Front, they're not able to win. So they are slowly worn down, and on November 11, so it's France, Germany, maybe Poland was part of it, I think, because this is why you had November 11 of 1918, Armistice Day, Germany surrenders. As soon as they have surrendered, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is canceled or annulled. Anything that they won in this treaty, they have now lost. And the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was between Germany and Russia. So everything they won from Russia in that treaty, they just lost. And Lenin actually said that that would happen. He's like, we're going to do this now. We're going to strengthen afterwards. So don't worry, you guys, which he did have that right. So everything they won in that treaty was annulled. Anything that they won in that treaty, was lost. World War I was finally over. Germany formally surrendered November 11, 1918. All nations agreed to stop fighting while the terms of peace were negotiated. I want us to note that this is not the end of the war. All they have done is lay down their weapons and agreed to stop fighting for a little while. The war is not formally ended until 1919 and the Treaty of Versailles. So if you guys remember the Treaty of Versailles, we had World War II where Germany was coming out of this deep humiliation and economic downturn, right? That's why they were able to get the Nazi party in there and have so much hateful meanness for everyone and everything. And say, we hate all Europe, look at, you're taking all our money, everyone is treating us like garbage. It's all because of what happened at the end of World War I and everything that they lost. So it's like, it just kept building and boiling up. And then World War II hit. But in this treaty, Germany lost crazy. Let's see. So the war is not formally ended until 1919 in the Treaty of Versailles. This is when Germany finally realized to what extent they had lost that war. We call this the deadly wound at Panium and the death at Sunday Law. The war does not end at Panium. Then they have to realize just how badly they have lost. They have realized that at the Treaty of Versailles.
So I'm trying to make sure I'm following this. That sentence, that paragraph there tells me that Germany is the king of the South.
I know.
Is that right?
This is what this is
Because I thought Russia was
transcribed. This is a battle though. It's the battles and they have to be flipped. Cause look, hold on. If you want to open that video 3 up though, because we're gonna watch that next. But if you look here, because we had this happen in World War II. You had here at the Battle of Barbarossa, where Germany invades Russia. Germany, it's a win for the King of the North, but in our time, it's a win for the King of the South. And it's like the King of the South is actually coming up against the King of the North. Do you see what I'm saying? So the King of the North, yeah, because here, the history of Alpha history, 1945, the last battle, the Battle of Panium, the King of the North loses. Do you see what I'm saying?
Say that again, sorry. I was looking for the video.
Oh, you're fine. Alpha history, 1945, the King of the North loses.
Right.
At Panium. The way she said it using the deadly wound wordage, which makes it sound like King of the South, right?
Mm-hmm. I'll have to go through this again, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it's the Alpha history. In the Alpha history in 1945 in World War II, you had Germany defeated. Okay, Germany was completely defeated, and it's the same thing in World War I. It's a Alpha history yet again. So Germany has to be defeated at Panium. It's still the King of the North, but because it's an Alpha history, it's the one that has to be defeated. If it's a Omega history, it's the King of the South that's defeated at Panium. This is why these switcheroos are just gonna.
Yeah, well, it's real complicated too, because if I'm understanding correctly, because I did watch these presentations, that you have, like you have the first and second angel's message, then the third, and at the end you have all three. So at the end, this is basically World War I, World War II, World War III, all on top of one another.
Yeah.
Each telling a different part of the story.
Right. We're using all the.
I got that part.
We're using all the characteristics of that battle, like what type of weaponry was used, right? but the opponent who was against who and who won, that little bit of it has to be switched from alpha to omega for it to match.
Remember this?
And it's in those 4 battles: Ipsus, Heraclea, Masculum, and Beneventum.
Remember this morning the quote from Uriah Smith, where he said you had to use the symbol of the lion to portray this information of Babylon, and the symbol of the gold head in this other part.
Oh,
It
that's
seems like it's
interesting, yeah.
kind of like
Oh,
that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So you're using different symbologies, different lines to portray different
Yeah.
parts of what's going on now,
Yeah.
right?
Kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I see what
Yeah.
you're saying.
I follow this better than that, but that's on YouTube.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want to play the video. So this is the one talking about Lenin and Trotsky. And if we do have time at the end, I did want to watch Kaiser Wilhelm because it explains what Trump is like, but we'll just watch this real quick.
Go ahead. World War I promised us a.
We've talked about Lenin, Trotsky, and the situation in Russia during and after both revolutions quite a bit in our regular episodes, and will continue to do so. But who were these guys, and how did they end up in their positions of power? Let's have a look.
World War
I'm
I is
Adriana.
also called the Great War.
Welcome to a Great War special episode about Lenin, Trotsky, and the Bolsheviks' unlikely rise to power. Leon Trotsky was born Lev Bronstein in what is now Ukraine in 1879. His father was a wealthy landowner, so Lev had an expensive education and was a model student. He was ambivalent towards politics until he met members of the People's Will Party, a radical organization that was behind Tsar Alexander II's assassination. Their beliefs had a romantic effect on Lev, and he abandoned his studies to live in their revolutionary commune, wearing workers' clothing and refusing anything even remotely bourgeois except his glasses. He organized workers' meetings and started the newspaper Our Cause. This eventually got him arrested in 1898, and he was sentenced to 2 years prison and then exile in Siberia. In prison, he shifted towards Marxism, and in Siberia read Lenin's The Development of Capitalism in Russia and tried to determine if Marxism meant reform or revolution. To do that, he fled his exile and made his way to London, abandoning his wife and daughters. He arrived there in October 1902 and went straight to Lenin's door. He knocked, was invited inside. Lenin was born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov in 1870 in Simbirsk. His parents were wealthy conservatives, but his brother was a radical socialist who got the death sentence for plotting, failing, to assassinate Tsar Alexander III. Lenin studied law at Kazan University, but his real interest was the socio-political theory of Marxism. He spent his time engaged in discussions about class struggle and the future of capitalistic society. Unlike many, he did not believe that agrarian society would lead the inevitable revolution. He also thought that Germany and its powerful social democratic movement was the prime target for proletarian uprising. In 1893, he moved to St. Petersburg and illegally printed his first Marxist publications. Then, financed by his mother, he visited Marxists in Zurich, Paris, and Berlin to discuss their theories. Upon his return to Russia, he was arrested and sentenced to a 3-year exile in Siberia. In 1900, he left Russia with plans to raise money for a Marxist newspaper called Iskra, the Spark. From Switzerland to Munich, and then to London he went, where Trotsky one day knocked on his door. Lenin was taken by Trotsky's fervor and knowledge and gave him a job on Iskra's editorial board, writing political articles and editorials. The main goal of Iskra's involvement with the Russian Marxists was to call a second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party and to restructure it with Lenin and the other editors at its head. Lenin was already showing autocratic ambition, which Trotsky did not approve of. He thought many would fear Lenin's dictatorial course and strict party discipline, and it would alienate people on both the left and the right. The Congress, held the summer of 1903, proved Trotsky right, as the Russian Marxists split into Lenin and the Bolsheviks, and the Mensheviks, with whom Trotsky sided. The Mensheviks believed the working classes needed guidance, but not a leader. The political situation was accelerating rapidly at the time, and civil unrest was shaking Russia. From Finland, Trotsky aimed to agitate the workers into laying down their tools and uniting to turn St. Pete into a revolutionary camp. Lenin called for violent revolution. During the general strike of October 1905, following Russia's defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, the Mensheviks formed the Petrograd Soviet with Trotsky as vice chairman in absentia. The 1905 revolt had the potential of turning into a socialist revolution, but the liberal reformers prevailed. Fast forward to Russia's February Revolution in 1917. Now, if you want to learn more about the situation in Russia between 1905 and 1917, check out our special episode. The link is in the description below. Anyway, many socialist organizations could emerge from the shadows, and many political figures could return from exile abroad. The Mensheviks and the SRs, socialist revolutionaries, began taking over the Soviets, councils. The Mensheviks were the strongest party in the Petrograd Soviet, and they called for a peace from the World War with no annexations. The Bolsheviks appeared on the scene in March and wanted to radicalize the whole socialist movement. So the Mensheviks wanted liberal reform, and the Bolsheviks wanted violent revolution, though they both wanted peace, right? The failure that summer of the Kerensky offensive destabilized Alexander Kerensky's government, and the political scene was swinging to the left. Trotsky had joined the Bolsheviks despite his disagreements with Lenin, and the SRs started splitting into left and right, with the left SRs allying themselves more and more with the Bolsheviki. However, the unsuccessful Bolshevik attempt to take over the government during the July days further divided the socialists. It also got Lenin branded a traitor, and he was forced to flee to Finland since the Kerensky government wanted him dead. He left Trotsky in charge. In September, as we saw, Kerensky made the fatal mistake of arming tens of thousands of Bolshevik and left SR supporters to fend off the coup attempt of Vlad Kornilov, and Lenin began calling to overthrow the government. By the end of October, the Military Revolutionary Committee was formed. Days later, the second revolution of the year was a fact. Lenin had a pretty clear vision of what he wanted to achieve and what kind of government he wanted to lead. Faced with a choice of joining a coalition with the other socialist parties and being a minor voice inside a multi-party government, or actively destroying any compromising ideology, he chose the latter. The Bolsheviks were on an all-or-nothing course. Without Lenin, they would not have emerged as powerfully as they did. He was convinced that he was the revolution, and should he fail, the revolution would too. He was probably right. However, had Trotsky and the left SRs not supported Lenin at the crucial moments, the Bolsheviks may well have been a minor party in a coalition. And it was Trotsky who organized the takeover of Petrograd while Lenin feared for his life. But when Trotsky held power, he ceded it to Lenin. For Trotsky, the revolution was everything, not personal power, and he exchanged power for acceptance into the Bolshevik ranks. As for the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, new research from unpublished records show that Germany funded Lenin and the Bolsheviks more than previously believed. And by the end of 1917, Lenin and Germany shared common interests, dissolving the Russian army and peace on the Eastern Front. For Germany, this is obvious. But for Lenin, the army was an element that could be dangerous in the future. Germany had an interest in Lenin and the Bolsheviks staying in power, and may have been Lenin's strongest allies, recognizing no other negotiating partners for the treaty. Most of the other Russian socialists, though, including Trotsky, disagreed with Lenin's desire for peace, but they could not deny that the Russian army pretty much only existed on paper by then. But it was also pretty much their hands-on agitation and their intense propaganda in November that had sent the army home. Lenin ignored the calls for the peace to be negotiated in a neutral country. He thought that with all the international socialists, he would not be able to convince his party of peace. Many of them believed that the world revolution would emerge if the German workers realized their leaders had fought the war for territorial gain. So they favored a peace without annexations. If Germany refused such a peace, then the revolution would begin, and the Revolutionary War might destroy the Bolsheviks in Russia, but it would start a world revolution. Trotsky conducted the peace talks, not just as foreign minister, but as someone who had taken no money from the Germans. He was told to delay the talks as much as possible, since revolution was on the horizon. In mid-January, Germany laid down terms that would take 150,000 square kilometers of Russian land. Petrograd Soviet was mad as hell. Many voted for war. Others walked out. In the Moscow Soviet, only 13 people supported Lenin. 400 voted for war. Lenin was losing control because the idea of betraying the international revolution drove many into opposition. Trotsky floated the neither war nor peace idea, which might at least buy time to organize the Red Army. He got a lot of support. Lenin then changed his rhetoric. He no longer spoke of peace, but asked for a respite, arguing that a treaty was just a piece of paper they could tear up whenever, and war with Germany would come when they were stronger. Well, we saw what happened when Germany reignited the Eastern Front because of the stalled negotiations. They were virtually unopposed in the field and could march pretty much straight to Moscow if they continued. On February 24th, the Russian government voting whether to accept a peace treaty took place. Many from the left could not vote against their principles. Many were seen crying as they voted for peace, but Lenin got his majority. But no one wanted their signatures on the treaty. Trotsky threatened to resign. Finally, Grigory Sokolnikov agreed to do it. Lenin kept the conditions of the treaty a secret until March the 7th, when he spoke again. Russia lost 780,000 square kilometers, 56 million people, 2/3 of coal, iron, and steel production, 40% of the workers, the ideological base, were gone. But he said that the treaty was the only way to save Russia and their revolution. In the end, Lenin alienated most of the revolutionary Bolsheviks, provoked an Allied intervention, and gave Germany huge chunks of territory. Transcaucasia was lost. Ukraine, the breadbasket, was lost. If Germany won the World War, Lenin claimed, they would not honor the treaty anyhow, and a revolutionary war would follow. If Germany lost, then the agreement was void and the Allies would intervene. Either way, major war was coming, and an army needed to be created. What was already there was famine, starvation, and the beginnings of a civil war.
Yeah,
The story of Lenin, Trotsky, and the Bolsheviki is immensely complex and is really difficult to grasp sometimes. We put some of our recommended sources in the video description below.
You said stop. No.
Yeah. So I don't know why I didn't see this before. I was wondering who, but man, does Trotsky look like Steve Bannon or what?
I don't think I saw this. There we go.
But yeah, he supported Lenin so much, and he wasn't the one who was doing the physical fighting, but he was supporting the ideology, and he was all for the ideology of the revolution. That is Steve Bannon. Wow.
Lenin had good vision though. I mean, because everything that, not saying I'm not for him, I'm just saying that what he saw as far as things to happen to come, if we did this from cause to effect, he saw that very well. As far as if I do this, this is going to happen. If I don't do that, this is going to happen. And I think that's what helped him prosper in his gains, really.
So on that point, Lenin was able to see what the people of Russia were looking for and played to it. And Trump was able to see what the US workers were wanting, and he played to that, right? So it's the same, they're incredibly alike. And if you heard the words that they used to describe Russia and Lenin in there, is he was polarizing the left and the right more and more and more at a high speed. Yeah. So it's matching.
So Lenin is
Trump.
And who was Bannon?
That's just my application. I see Trotsky as a Steve Bannon.
Trotsky. Okay.
So anyways, so that's that. Let's go to application really quick.
And Trotsky's the one that went and asked Lenin to come back or something?
Trotsky was a political idealist, and I had a girl in one of my ultrasound classes who she was like in the army at some point, but she loved Trotsky. And I'm like, this Trotsky lady. She's like, he's great, he's so smart, his ideology is defended. I'm like, aren't you an American soldier? What happened here? What's happening?
Living in the wrong country.
I was so confused by her. She was weird times. Anyway. But Trotsky, yeah, I think he wrote a book too, if I remember right. Let's do some quick application, finish those 3 lines off, and then we'll go to the other one. Add to our line, which is mostly already written. We're just gonna add a couple things. So we're gonna do Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. It was a hard one to say. Litovsk. So this is going to be at the Battle of Raffia. So at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, you have Russia losing. Did you have Russia losing? Yeah. Right? Which is the king of the south. Russia is losing. But in our time, we know that at Raffia, the United States losing. So again, you have to switch it. We're going to say Russia. We're going to put Russia over to the side because I need to add another waymark right here. Okay. November. Oh, let me write. Wait. So we're going to do November 8, 1917. This is going to be Germany sends Lenin to Russia. And then Russia surrenders to Germany. Okay. I don't know how to spell that. Armistice Day. 11, 19, 18. And then Treaty of Versailles. That's a Y. Okay. So for the application on the R line of that, there's just a couple things we need to add. So I'm just gonna power through the words of it and then we'll add those little waymarks at the end. And hopefully we can, I doubt we're gonna have time, but maybe we'll have time to watch that one other video of Kaiser Wilhelm. Okay, so 1989-91, this is our application. Remember that Germany and Austria-Hungary are the king of the north, Russia is the king of the south, but when it comes to those four battles, Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, or in our time, 2016, 2018, 2019, and Panion, right? So those four waymarks, they have to be flipped from a alpha history to an omega history. So whatever you're reading in alpha, you have to make it backwards and then it's gonna fit in omega. So it's hard. And that one with Germany and Russia was confusing me too. That's why I had a headache in the middle there because I'm like, wait, what's happening? But it's not, yeah, okay. Anyways, US is a two-horn power. And it goes after two smaller independent countries, Kuwait and Iraq. So again, you have Iraq is the sphere of influence of Russia, and then Kuwait is the sphere of influence of Iraq. So it's like Serbia and Bosnia. Serbia is sphere of influence of Russia, and Bosnia is sphere of influence of Serbia. Okay. So 1979 revolution in Iraq, and it turns into pro-Russian country with the rule of Saddam Hussein. They were already allies before, but now they're very close. Okay, so Saddam starts to extend his influence over the Middle East, and the U.S. is threatened by this. We saw that Hillary video. The U.S. doesn't like the Soviet Union taking over the Middle East. So Iraq does something like Serbia. Iraq does the same thing that Serbia did. Iraq sees that they are surrounded by similar brother nations and wants to take control of the area. And they choose Kuwait because it's small So the U.S. is threatened okay, Kuwait is here and Iraq is here. So they're like neighboring countries. Okay, you guys see that? Okay. Go back. So the U.S. is threatened by this because they know Iraq and Russia are close. The Soviet Union was not defeated yet, so they were still very strong enemies between U.S. and Russia. U.S. did not want the power of Russia to spread to did not want the Russia's power to spread, so the U.S. goes in and takes the whole territory of Kuwait when Iraq attempted to take it. So Iraq was allies with Russia at this time, but like Russia in World War I, they were not strong enough to respond at this time. So what just happened to Russia? Okay, so this is after. Okay, it's not before. So they just lost the Cold War. So when Saddam Hussein comes into power and he's strong with Russia, that's like in 1979. But in 1989, after some time now the U.S. takes Kuwait. But at this point, 1989 to 91, Russia is too weak, right? They just faced a war that they lost, the Cold War, and they just faced an internal revolution. So they're too weak to help their little ally, just like they were too weak to help Serbia. So Kuwait becomes dependent on the U.S. for protection economically, right? So you have a bigger power trying to mess with two smaller territories, Iraq and Kuwait. They try to mess with them through economic means by making Kuwait completely dependent on them. Iraq has a bigger ally, Russia, but Russia is too weak to help it at this time. The U.S. takes Iraq's sphere of influence, and Russia is too weak to respond. Out of this conflict, a terrorist organization forms known as Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. It came out of the Taliban. It's just further radicalized. So Al-Qaeda, which developed out of this conflict, launches a terrorist attack against America, the two-horned power, on 9/11/2001. So after the terrorist attack of 9/11, the U.S. Apportioned blame to Iraq, be it deserved or not. They had long wanted a war with Iraq, so 9/11 was just the excuse. It was not the cause. The U.S. sent an ultimatum to Iraq. We have two ultimatums in this history. You have three allies, Germany, France, and Russia, sent an ultimatum to the United States. We learned that from the history of the Third Diadochi War. But you also have the U.S. send an ultimatum to Iraq. Okay, that's why I was confused about that. I knew there was two, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So the ultimatum requires Saddam Hussein to step aside or there will be war. Prior to that, there had been other demands, the disarmament requirements on Iraq. Iraq had fulfilled most of those demands, or they were working on them, and at a good, reasonable pace. But November of 2001, this is after 9/11, there is a conflict between Bush and Rumsfeld. Bush tells Rumsfeld, what have you got in terms of plans for Iraq? I want a war plan. I want to get on it. I want you to keep it secret. In January of 2002, they captured an Al-Qaeda trainer and they tortured him. The CIA tortured him until he said there was a link between 9/11 and Iraq. This was a plan, an agenda long before 9/11. The terrorist attacks. The terrorist attacks was the excuse, not the cause. An ultimatum was sent ordering them to give up weaponry. According to the UN, they were doing quite well under that program, but George Bush sends an ultimatum. He gives them 2 days to remove Saddam Hussein and his sons or face attack by 280,000 American and British troops. When the US invaded Iraq, they were attacking the sphere of influence of the King of the South. So I want to consider what we have been saying this last year. We have seen World War II and have made application. We have seen 2014, 2016, 2018, 2019, and Panya. We connected World War II into this history. This is important. We said that in 2016, you can mark the beginning of the war on what front? This is the beginning of the war on the Western Front in 2016. That's the election year, right? 2019 is the beginning of the war on the Eastern Front. This is the World War II model that we're talking about right now, okay? What does that war look like? What does the Eastern Front look like? What are they fighting over? We have been increasingly saying that they're fighting over spheres of influence. It is all about spheres of influence. So from 2019, the Battle of Raphia, to the Battle of Panium is the Eastern Front for World War II, and they are fighting over spheres of influence. Many of us have seen the need. Okay, so let me just mark this real quick. So what she's saying is, what we saw through the wars, through looking at the wars, is that based off of World War II and the wars we saw there, it's showing us that there's an Eastern Front that starts at Raphia and it ends at Panium. And the Western Front starts at 2016 at the election, because it was happening in the United States, right? The West. So you have it start at the Western Front, and that one goes to Sunday Law. This is going to change now for World War I because of this. She says, many of us have seen the need in the last months to become familiar with history. Particularly the last 30 years, we have watched documentaries and studied articles. We have gone searching to understand the rise of Putin, the rise of Trump. As we've investigated, we have dug into some significant events. We will list some of them. We studied the Syria proxy war. We have talked about Afghanistan as another proxy war. That has been ongoing. We have discussed the Ukraine and Venezuela. We have even discussed the Arctic. All of these and others have been occurring in recent history, in the history behind us. So what have we already been in? They have already been fighting over spheres of influence from the very start. From the very start, they've been fighting. So if we see that there's the Eastern Front with spheres of influence from Raphia to Panium, that doesn't have any difference, because they've been having spheres of influence battles. And that's what World War I and Diadochi War III are looking at. They're filling in the gaps behind us of the spheres of influence battles, okay?
How they've begun.
Exactly, yes. And how they've been progressing, because we had some missing ones in there.
So what is World War II doing?
World War II is shedding light on the this end of the lines, and World War I and Diadochi III are showing us this end of the line.
Okay, so World War I and the Diadochi wars are showing how the spheres of influence begun.
Yeah.
World War II is showing us how those spheres of influence are maturing in there, or not necessarily maturing, but
It's specifically showing a difference between the Eastern Front.
okay.
Okay, so the Eastern Front, the proxy wars out there, because the Western Front is the front that's being fought at home, kind of.
So are the Eastern Front and the Western Front spheres of influence? How are they connected to spheres of influence?
The Western Front has to do with the U.S. and itself, okay, and its people, basically, from what I've understood. But specifically, the Eastern Front is the one that's with spheres of influence between King of the North and King of the South.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw that at Raphia to Panium, but what World War I is showing is that it actually, for that one, the Eastern Front starts in 2003 and ends in Raphia.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Got it.
So this is one Eastern Front for World War I, and then the second one is for World War II.
Got
And
it.
it's showing us a prolonged sphere of influence.
Just
war.
the entire thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty much it's like
Yeah.
finishing the
Yeah.
whole thing off. Yes, okay. So they have been fighting over spheres of influence for the last 16 years, from 2003 to 2019. So when we say there's a war that starts in 2019 and they're fighting over spheres of influence, what does that even mean? They were already fighting over spheres of influence. How can they start fighting here when they've already been fighting for 15 years? So exactly what are we expecting to see in the Eastern Front of World War II? Raphia is a war over spheres of influence, but the Syrian war is a war of spheres of influence, as is Afghanistan, Ukraine, Venezuela, the quarrel over the Arctic. There is a reason why Trump wants Greenland. It's all about spheres of influence over the Arctic. So we have been preparing for months, expecting to see this big event, and a war began on November 9, fighting for an area of influence. There is a problem. We are already in it. We entered into that war in 2003. From Vladimir Putin's election in the year 2000, he was attempting to work with the United States. He developed a relationship with George W. Bush, He was hoping that he would be able to work with George Bush and might have some mutual respect. By the way, after 9/11, the very first international leader to call George Bush and offer support and comfort was Vladimir Putin. How was he treated? George Bush did not care what Putin said about Iraq. He was going to have war. Despite the work of Putin to turn America away from this war, George Bush said he is going ahead anyway. So there is an interesting documentary that many of us have watched. It's called Putin's Revenge by Frontline. We all saw that here. You can see he is getting revenge on the US for 2 altercations, 2 humiliations. One of them was the fall of the Soviet Union, and the second was the war in Iraq. They state in that documentary, it was the Iraq war that turned Vladimir Putin against the West. So from 2003 forward, in 2007, he's saying no one feels safe. We put that on the line already. Because of the behavior of the United States, overthrowing other governments without the authorization of the UN. It is a direct threat to his dictatorship. It is at this point, at the Iraq war, that he begins to push back. How? Spheres of influence. Now he is going to get involved with Syria. So when the West tells Putin that he shouldn't be doing that, what does he say? He tells them not to preach to him because they invaded Iraq first. He takes Crimea, and the West says that Putin is not welcome at the G8 because he invaded Crimea. He tells them that they invaded Iraq, and if they can do it to Iraq, he can do it to Ukraine. This has been his excuse ever since. So when America did not recognize his sphere of influence, he turned against them. From 2003 forward, there is this developing struggle between the US and the rule of Putin. But Bush doesn't even know what he has done. He says that they lost Putin and he doesn't know how that happened. And he should know because it was Iraq. We have been in the Eastern Front as well as the Western Front since 2003.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Whoa, that's interesting. So Iraq was Russia's sphere of influence, and because the U.S. invaded that and won that influence, that's when Putin wanted revenge on the U.S. So that's when he struck at Ukraine.
It was
like there's
2014 where he struck at Ukraine, but it was built up after everything that the US was doing. Because they invaded Iraq, they took that region, and when Benghazi happened, it was like a repeat for Putin. He's like, you're doing this again, and I'm not. It's over. I'm not doing this again with you. Because you're seeing Iraq to him all over again. So what World War I has is because in World War II, again, you had the Eastern Front start at Rafia and end at Penium, but you had the Western Front start in 2016 and end at Sunday Law. That's World War II. In World War I, the Eastern and Western Front, they both start at 2003, both of them, but the Eastern Front ends first at Rafia, and then the Western one goes to Sunday Law. And I have that image at the end, which I'll send out to everyone, and I'll put it on the website because I just finished it like last night or something.
Are you going to explain why the Eastern Front, why they both start at 2003, and then did you already explain that? And then why one couldn't stop
over Iraq?
Oh, okay.
Because of Iraq.
Yeah, because people in the United States were also split over that decision. There's always been people, like you had little bits of this with ones that we don't use in application, like Vietnam, the war there, right? You had a huge split in the 60s of the US. Isn't that where everyone was like, get out of there, what are we doing in there? And then people were like, you guys are traitors if you're not for this war. Huge split. Whenever a country goes to war, there's going to be a huge split in there, whether you should be doing that or not. I don't think there's ever been like a unanimous, like, yep, that's where you're going to do that. So, and the shifty situation that was happening with Bush in the situation, there was that Michael Moore video shows that, how he was trying to get into Iraq and how they were literally making things up to try to get in there. I mean, there was no reason to. So then World War I is based off of that application because in 1914, the moment that they entered into that war of World War I, it was on both fronts. They both started in that same time.
It's a sick world.
Yeah. So now our application is going to get a bit more interesting. So remember that World War I and World War II are both histories of failure because they're both alpha histories. And this, we talked about this, that you're going to have to switch things. So I'm going to skip some of this because I already explained that a bunch of times, so we're running out of time. So, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we have to switch, okay. So there has been conflict between Russia and the United States since 2003, but it is a history of failure in World War I. There is a battle in 2016 and we need to flip it. Who gave Trump to America? Russia did. So this is that Lenin Germany thing, okay? They were behind Trump. Russia supports him. It's all with a purpose to overthrow the establishment by a revolutionary leader from the inside. When does Trump do that? When we talk about dictatorship, we talk about November 9. They voted, though, November 8. So Trump said that we have this bad relationship with Putin and he can restore the relationship between the two countries. It is the same promise that Lenin made to him with concerning Germany, to his country. So when we study this history, in the history of World War II, we understand that from 2016, where we marked the Battle of Ipsus forward, we have to start switching. So like I said, those 4 battles, Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, those 4 battles, you have to switch between a history of failure and success, okay? So one history leads to failure and the other leads to success. One more time, we're gonna go work through the application. We saw the Bosnian Crisis. This conflict is really between Austria-Hungary and Russia, but you also see 2 smaller powers, Serbia and Bosnia. This conflict is between the US and Russia. There are 2 smaller countries, Iraq and Kuwait. In both histories, Russia cannot defend its sphere of influence. Because of the action of the King of the North, terrorist organizations form with a hatred of it. So because the US invaded that area and sends the people there, because they're like, look at what these Americans are doing, they're crazy. Because America didn't go in there to prop up their economy like Russia did. America went in there with weapons to destroy people. So they hated Americans. So where's Iraq? So at 9/11, Al-Qaeda attacks the United States. Austria-Hungary sent an ultimatum to Serbia and the US sent an ultimatum to Iraq. Europe thought that Serbia had fulfilled the majority of the ultimatum, enough to avoid war. Austria-Hungary invaded anyway. Most of the world and enough of the UN believed that Iraq had done enough to avoid war. The US invaded anyway. So Russia responds. Putin responds to the Iraq war, which has led to much of the conflict we have seen in the last 16 years. Now we switch it because we are in the war. So Germany sent Lenin into Russia. Switch that. Russia sent Trump into the United States. Lenin says he is going to end this war. He is going to make peace with Germany and Russia. Switch that. Trump says he is going to end this war and make peace with the between the US and Vladimir Putin. Now back, Lenin overthrows the government November 8 of 1917. Remember, it's called the October 8 Revolution. They took so long to change their calendar to the Gregorian, but the calendar we use today, the October Revolution, or Red October, all took place in November. So November 8, he overthrows the government. And then switch that, instead of Lenin in Russia, you have Trump in the US, November 8, people voted and Trump overthrew the establishment. That was the only election I ever watched in my life, and I stayed up till like 3 a.m. to see the results, and I didn't even know why. I was like, it's pointless anyways. Then I went to sleep. I'm like, well, that was that. And now I'm like, I remember those hours. Anyways, Lenin fulfilled his mission by ending the war on the Eastern Front. He makes peace, but at great cost. We need to consider this waymark. From a year ago, we were not looking at current events and we were expecting this major hot war. Then we learned that it is not going to be a hot war, but an information war over spheres of influence. Now we learned that the war does not begin at Rakia, but ends at Rakia. So if you combine World War I and World War II, World War I says that there has been a war on the Eastern Front since 2003. Let's do that. From 2003 to 2019, here November 9, it ends. So the Eastern Front of World War I is going to end this November 9. and the eastern front of World War II is gonna start. But it's gonna look like the eastern front of World War I, just spheres of influence battles. So nothing's gonna, that's the thing, is that everyone is waiting for these huge events, but they've been happening under our eyes. We just weren't looking at them. So they've been just passing us by, but now we're learning to actually look at them and see what's happening. So peace. Here's the other situation. World War II says there is a war on the Eastern Front from 2019 to Panium. It ends at Panium. As we have studied this history, we have come to understand that it is a war over spheres of influence. But we recognize that from the war in Iraq, they have been doing this in Syria and Venezuela and Ukraine and all over the world. What do we expect to see? I would suggest part B. We have already seen it. We have already been in it for 16 years. They don't start the war at Rafah. They end it because Trump came to power with the mission and with the promise that he could make friends with Putin. However, it is going to be at a cost. At Panium, we know Russia loses. How is Russia going to lose? How did they lose in 1989? They're overthrown from the inside. So at Panium, Russia loses like Germany lost because we just switched them, right? So everything that they gained is lost to them. So as we've been recognizing, Panium is the beginning of the fall, and it is completed at Sunday Law. That is the death. And then we go back into Trump and Lenin. And then a couple of final points before we close this history of 1918. I don't want to go into detail. I just want to put out a point regarding the breaking of the Republic horn. So we've placed it in 2016 with the overthrowing of the so-called establishment. Basically, she says we can make a case for putting it in Rafah and Panium and Sunday Law for the breaking of the Republican horn. It's gradual. And then
so when is it finally broken?
Sunday Law, the big Sunday Law after Panium. So in the history of World War I, we see Germany as a king, but you can also identify a king. We know all this history is Kaiser Wilhelm, the King of Germany. I want to make an application. Germany used to be divided in different smaller territories in the early 1870s. 1871, Bismarck unites all those territories and unites Germany's empire. So what we're going to see here, and what she goes into, and I'm not going to go into detail right now, but there's a video you can watch, is Bismarck was the uniter and the one making allies out of everyone. He represents the establishment, which in our time we can say was Clinton. We did make that application before, but in this application, she's saying this is Obama. He prevented a lot of wars. He made the Iran deal. He had a lot of alliances that he made that kept war at bay. Okay, and we didn't appreciate that. We should have been thankful for it. But then you have Kaiser Wilhelm II come in, who is this young, arrogant leader who wants to take the dictatorship, and he wants to rule based off of his personal relationships with people. He thinks he can run Europe based off of his best friends list and how his relationships and interactions are with different people.
That's Trump.
That's Trump, 100%. And he's crazy and erratic.
Yep.
Has crazy, weird, erratic behaviors, and he's volatile. So you can just go on the list. And
Can we say bully?
Yeah. And so she's saying that if you want a really perfect picture of Trump, you combine Kaiser Wilhelm and Hitler, and you'll have a really fantastic picture of who he is. So yeah, she goes in here about how Trump just wants a personal dictatorship. People are, insulting him, and he's like, how dare you insult America? But they're like, no, it's just you. We're just talking bad about you, not America. But he's like, no. He takes it as he is America.
Or you can't.
It's his brand.
Kingdom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So this is a video about him, which is interesting, which maybe we have time to watch. I don't know. And there's more here. What time was I supposed to be done?
I think 5:30. Was it 5:30?
Okay. Let's fill in our line, and we'll look at that last line, and that's it. But if you guys want to watch the thing later, that's there. It's interesting. It goes over, and her quotes in the transcription, she quoted things that this guy actually pointed out in the video about Kaiser Wilhelm almost word for word. So I don't know where he was quoting from, but thought it was interesting. It's a good video to see how he worked there. So we're gonna add on this bottom line under the second, I guess we'll mark here, is U.S. takes Iraq's sphere of influence. So it's just invisibly writing. Sphere of influence. And then Russia is too weak to help. Right here. And then here we're going to add a terrorist attack. 9/11.
Right under here and here and here. See if I put the line underneath those three. She's going on this part right here.
Are you broken?
Over here. First, the U.S. takes Iraq.
I'm not touching anything. What happened? Hold on, I'm gonna relaunch this because it's broken now. Okay, you're gonna move it? Yes, okay. So we have a terrorist attack. Here, 9/11. And then we have US goes to Iraq. 2003. And November 8, 2016. Russia sends Trump to USA. And Trump comes in with the help of Steve Bannon. I swear, I'm gonna have to email her and ask her if Trotsky can be Steve Bannon, because that's so crazy how he has this right-hand man who.
Let me do that because I got it wrong.
And the other thing we want to add here.
Take a picture of yours that you have written on over there for us, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
And send it out, because I did mess up a few places and it's too hard to fix with a pen.
I have this whole thing actually typed out nicely on here. I could just send an image out.
Okay.
But we're just gonna do.
That's good to know because I had to leave the room a few times.
You guys think I didn't know that I would have to do that?
Wow, that's a good broken horn.
I've been practicing.
Yeah. And you got
Okay.
the terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And then right after, no one feels safe, right next to it.
I'm gonna zoom out here.
November 8, right here, make another line, November 8, 2016.
Let me zoom out some more. So there's our line. Let's go here. So we have this. This is actually typed out. I can send that to everyone. But let's look at this right now. So
That's
we
a lot.
we said, where are we? Okay, so right here. Up here, this is World War I. I know it's far, just get a general idea from far away. Hold on, I do have to, just because you can't see my cursor running around. Okay, this will work.
See, now you guys know why I'm looking like this at my computer.
Yeah.
Because I can't see.
So World War I is in blue here, up here. Okay, so you see Eastern Front and Western Front. They both start right here at Iraq War in 2003. Okay, right here. Let me just do this. So this is where the Western and the Eastern front of World War I start. But if you go to World War II, which is here in the white, you have the Western front start here in 2016, and you have the Eastern front start at Raffia. Okay, so that's the main difference. The other thing that it's showing is this area here from 2018 back to 2003 is an area of war between King of the North and King of the South, according to World War I. Okay, but according to World War II application, that is an area of peace between the King of the North and the King of the South, and an area of friendship up until Heraclea. And that's, now you have two things, war and peace between the two same people happening at the same time. It seems contradictory, but things are a lot more complicated than that in reality. So that's what's going on there. So that's what these applications have helped us to see, and also some other things as well. Okay, my throat hurts.
It reminds me of the gathering and the scattering, because for the gathering you have to switch the characteristics for the, because you can't look at the scattering for what to do in the gathering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're flipping the characteristics on that between them.
Yeah.
Or am I thinking?
I don't know if I've
Or
ever
much
heard them
as
say
tired.
that you actually flip the characteristics between scattering and gathering, but I know you can't use the same rules to govern you the scattering as you do in the gathering. Okay. So
It just might be late in the day.
it's all good.
Stretching.
I don't know that we'll have that many questions for that, so I hope that worked out, but it's up to you guys if you want to watch that video on Kaiser Wilhelm right now, or you can wait till later and extract it out as you know. It's up to you guys.
Huh?
I'm way over time, so.
So somebody want to close in prayer?
Oh, I hear you. You can ask.
Yeah. So maybe Brother Troy would like to close in prayer. Is that a no? We can't hear you if you are.
You might be AFK.
Okay. Somebody want to pray?
I can pray.
Okay.
Amen.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for everything we're able to learn today. Our minds are exploding with information from all our meetings, and we thank you for all this incredible light that we were able to partake of and do this in our monthly meeting. And we ask that you continue to help us to be blessed like this more and more often, Lord. We thank you for everything we're able to learn. We ask that you help us to continue to let it sink in and to understand what's happening. We ask that you continue to help us strive for more light and strive to be able to use parables and these rules of Bible methodology that bring out so much information. That's such a huge blessing, Lord. Please help us to be able to grapple with these things. We ask for protection for everyone who's going to go home tonight and has to drive. We thank you for all the blessings you've given us, and we thank you for your infinite love and kindness and wisdom, and how you blessed us with things that we're not deserving of, Lord. And for whatever reason we're here, you have us here, and we ask that you continue to take us through all the way. And we pray all of these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
How long is the video, Sister Adriana?
Video closing.
They're usually like 10 to 11 minutes if it's that same guy.
Are we? So how does the Q&A portion count? It's just like informal?